Hello everyone, this is Pastor Katie from the First Presbyterian Church of Decatur, and it is with sad news that I come to you today to tell you of the passing of Don Reits. We prayed hard for he and his family yesterday, and his baptism was complete yesterday afternoon. I want to thank you all for your continued prayers and support of Don and his family, and they will certainly need that in the upcoming days and weeks ahead of them. One of the things that this has really brought home for me, this is one of the first deaths that we've had in our congregation since COVID-19, and how difficult grief is in this time of quarantine and social distancing. So a lot of large gatherings of people aren't able to meet, and so we're not able to celebrate Don's life the way that we would like to. We can't hug Carolyn and their family and offer them physical sympathies and the comfort of a hug. And it's gonna look a little different, and we don't know just yet what that means for their family and how difficult that is, in addition to the difficulty of not being able to see Don in the past couple of weeks as he was in and out of the hospital and rehab. They weren't able to visit him. Luckily, Carolyn was able to say her goodbyes with Don yesterday before he passed, but for a lot of their family that was not true. And that just breaks my heart when we think about what it means for people who are faced with that kind of grief in this time. I think it's one of the consequences that we don't see until it affects us. And the things we don't think about is that we can't have a funeral the way that we would like to. We can't have to share in condolences of one another. We can't be together the way that we want to be together in a time like this. And that's hard. And I think it's hard for all of us to think about, but it certainly is one of the cautions that we need to be aware of, that we may not always see, that there are real consequences for folks that we know and love, even though Don's death is not related to the virus at all. But his family is still having to grieve in this difficult time, and affected hugely by the precautions that we're experiencing, and importantly so. So it's sad and it hurts a lot, and I think this is yet one more thing that we are able to say, oh, this is hard, and this is a difficult time. And one of the things too, I think we need to grieve. Grief is going to look really different in this time and in this place for people. And I think that that's true for all of us, even if we haven't lost a loved one in the past couple of months or weeks. But as we grieve the loss of a job, or the life that we thought we had, our plans. I was supposed to be heading to Paris on Saturday for my first trip to Paris, and that has been a huge source of grief for me, to give up those plans. When we first canceled those flights, it was tough. And even now, like, knowing that it should have been this weekend, like, I was gonna be on vacation for 2 weeks, it was gonna be great, we were gonna be in Paris, and that's not true anymore. And that is something that we have to grieve. So all of us are going through grief, I think, right now, and I think it's interesting to name the stages of grief. They've been greatly debated, and there are stages, but they're not like sequential, and grief looks different for every person. But there are 5 stages of grief that we kind of know about and we're able to identify. So there's denial, like this didn't happen, and it's not real. And there's anger, which you're mad that it happened, and you're upset about what that means. There's depression, where once you're able to come to terms with that it happened, it's the heartbreak and the sadness and the kind of inability to do anything about it. Then there's bargaining, where you're just trying to get out of it and you're willing to do anything you can to get out of it. These are people who will maybe work their way through grief. They'll commit themselves to a project, they'll do something big because they need to get out of it. And then the final stage is acceptance, where you come to terms with it, with the loss, and you're able to hold on to it. Now, these are not sequential, they're not universal, but they're kind of little frameworks that we can help understand some of our reactions. And so what's interesting is, I think, as we're losing as the weeks and months go on, I can see within myself those stages as they have happened. I've certainly been angry and depressed, and I've bargained and I've worked my way through it. And I was like, I'm gonna work extra hard so we can, and that isn't helpful either. I just end up tired. And then there's like denial that that it's real. And I think we can see that too in the reactions of others. Certainly, I think there is a lot of anger, there's a lot of denial, there's a lot of pain, and those are all sources of pain, of all that we've lost in this time. So as we've lost loved ones, as we've lost a semblance of ourselves, of what our lives are, what they mean, we've lost our routines, we've lost the ability to plan things that we love. There's a lot that we have to grieve, and that is a normal and a natural part of life. We are always grieving. We're not always good about naming it as such, but I think in this time it's true that we're always grieving, and there's always loss, and to name those things, I think, is really important. But also to know that this is a biblical truth that we know of. God tells us, do not be afraid. God tells us that we are not alone. Jesus is with us. Jesus has sent an advocate to be at our side with the Holy Spirit, that whatever it is that we're feeling, we're not alone in it, and that there's some level, and it's okay to feel any of those things and to feel grief and to name it as such. So I pray today that you are able to grieve those things that you've lost, to engage with those feelings, to name them as grief, and to say, I'm grieving and I'm angry about all that I've lost, or I'm grieving and I'm kind of in denial that this is really happening. As we continue to lift up one another in prayer for all that we've lost, including that of a good friend and servant of Christ in Don Reits. So I pray God's presence and blessing be upon you today, and we will see you again soon.